basic thing of music. I literally didn't know jack squat. And so what I would do is I would watch people playing it on YouTube, and I would pause it every like second and see where their hand position was. And so that way I'd just memorize throughout like the song how to get it all down. And then I auditioned with that same song. I sang it and played it to a school to get into this art school.
Piano professional.
Yeah, like the principal was like a professional piano player and all, like, top notch. And so I had to go into his little office, which is not normally where the rehearsals take place. Yeah. And so I had to audition in front of him and like the music director there and play that song. So it was, I'm sure, I messed up a few times, but I think they saw the passion I had to want to do it. And so they gave me a chance, and that helped me get a start and just kind of like putting everything together then from there, going to that school.
How amazing the Beatles.
Wow.
Of course. Greatest band of all times. But like, you watch the videos because they were so ahead of their times with videography. Everything was documented.
I love that about it.
Everything's
like a cameo shot of them just kind of doing about their lives, so you get to kind of see the more closer side to them rather than just them in an interview all the time. Like a lot of people were going around documenting them and stuff while they were just doing their thing, and there's just so much footage of that that's so fun to watch.
And their thing with performing. With doing films.
Well, yeah, I mean, some of those films like Hard Day's Night and stuff, I mean, how hilarious, right? I mean, they even look at them now, I think, or not they, most of them are gone, but, it was kind of a pandemonium moment when they finally arrived in America, and, even up to their last show in Miami at the little hotel they played in America. I mean, they had such a following and were such a new thing, but they also had that critical thing with the older group, who the same group who didn't want to see Elvis swinging his hips around. They were just like, oh, what are they going to think of next? Look at those hairdos, those mop tops, and but the way their music evolved and that, it's really a lesson in, any kind of art that evolves over time. The differences they had as band members, their individual pursuits. And that's one of the things, like when they finally broke up and Abbey Road came out, all those albums that came out right after for them independently, like George Harrison's great album with all those songs, All Things Must Pass. A lot of those songs, like, he just felt like he wasn't getting the respect from the other Beatles, like they didn't take his songs serious enough.
No, he had a quote where he was like, if we were to keep doing the Beatles, I'd have songs for the next like 50 years, for each album, because you only give me 2 songs or like a song per album. So it's like I have all this stuff built up, and you guys are only letting me go so far. So yeah,
it's one of my favorite films. Martin Scorsese on George Harrison. Have you guys seen that?
Living in the Material World.
That's incredible.
Yeah, very good.
So well, the colors, everything is just like. And so well constructed, so well built. That's the thing with a good director, right?
Yeah. And back to Peter Jackson, like what he did with the new Beatles Get Back series.
Get Back,
So amazing if you go back and look at, because like it was black and white and just so choppy and grainy, and then what they've done, it makes it look like it was just filmed. So it's just awesome for Beatles fans, at least, like me who grew up so long after them and don't get to see what it was maybe like in person. So
there's a lot of misunderstandings, I think, about George too. They always said the quiet Beatle, like he was, but if you've ever seen one of those things where he talks in French or something, he speaks fluid French. He grew up, his family took him to Paris all the time. He apparently wasn't a quiet Beatle when they were amongst themselves. He would stand up and shout and fight for his own part of it all, but it became such a complex thing. And I think George Martin running the studio too. I mean, there were just so many factors that in the end they just had too much to do as a band, so they had to break up and do it independently. A lot of Paul's songs that came out on the first album, they all had these songs, and so did John. He had a whole range of songs, and but they, to do it as the Beatles, it was one of those things.
Brandon, we're talking about the visual side of things a lot, and you have been in the film industry for how many years now, would you say?
I'd say just over 30.
So you've seen,
since I first started, I really started at the worm's eye level.
You've seen massive changes in the industry.
Well, one of the great things about it was I moved to LA to go to film school. And so when I showed up there in 1993, it was the end of one era, which was shooting on film, cutting film, doing optical negatives for audio, making a negative cut. So I put together what became like the biggest film ever made at my school. I won the Panavision New Filmmaker Award. It was the first one ever edited on an Avid or digitally. I had Billy Connolly in it, the Scottish comedian who played one of the lead roles, who was just an absolute gem. I mean, the guy is a genius. He's not just a genius. He is just the kindest soul. He is so funny. He is so... we showed up in Hollywood in this alley to go into the bar we were filming as the Speakeasy. And I'll be damned if he wasn't standing there waiting for us. Yeah. And I wasn't sure if I was even going to be able to get in. But he was like, oh, no, I told him I'm doing it. Because they had tried to double book him, and the agent called me like the day before. And I mean, I had all this stuff set up, like film crew, everything. I had all the locations. And he was like, Billy might have to go on a talk show tomorrow. Can we reschedule him for next week? And I was like, well, actually, this isn't that kind of a production, you know? I mean, if we're doing it tomorrow, or I'm going to find a new Billy, and I don't want to do that because, you know, Billy's Billy. And so he canceled whatever else he had, and he came for a couple of days, and that was one of the greatest times, because at that time, to take something all the way through like that, shooting it on film. So I shot the whole film. I was working at Warner Brothers already, so they gave me full carte blanche access to the costume department, to the props warehouse. I was gaming it. So I went and got all the short ends of the 35 mil stock from Batman and Robin, City of Angels. They only have, some cans would have like 400 feet, some would have 600 feet. I took it all down to LA at Hollywood and sold it. And then I took the money and went over to Kodak and bought 16 millimeter brand new cans of film, using all their like Vision stocks and everything. So everything was just going so like amazingly. But the one thing is the budget only went so far as till the shoot was over. So I had, 15 cans of 16 millimeter film with the whole production on it. And then I had to go out and raise that money. And so that was a whole nother part of the story. And then even when you get done with a project like that, and so making a film like that from soup to nuts all the way through, that was the lesson of school. That was the lesson of everything, is to be able to just have to find your way through those kind of challenges of, from locations to the equipment to the people. I mean, I had this one guy that played, he was a PA technically helping me, but I put him in a part because I needed somebody to play like a dead guy on the floor. And then we were going to Idlewild, this mountain town, and we were going to film. And I was like, yeah, I got us like a cabin, and there's a second cabin. We're all just going to take a bit. And he was like, oh, well, actually, I think I would like to have my own cabin. And if I can have a cabin, I'll make you a list of other things I would like. And I finally, because he owned the VW van I was using too in the end.
Right.
So expect all this stuff.
Oh no, I was like, man, come on, man, really? I said, this is a low budget production. We're not buying you as an extra just because you have a van. So at the last scene of the movie, we filmed it in El Segundo in California, which is down by LAX. And this guy wouldn't come anymore. I got to where we were going to film. I looked across the street. There was a van almost like his. And it was the guy who owned the bar. So I went over, bought a beer, and I sat there and kind of looked at him with sad eyes for a while. And he's like, what's going on? I said, well, I'm the one over there making that film. Can I use your van?
I'll buy another beer.
Yeah, we'll all eat lunch here today.
We'll give you a cabin to stay in.
Hey, how crazy is that with the industry? Like, if you are at the top, you will have access to everything. And if you're trying to get to the top, you will have to hustle your way through every single bit of the production.
There are just factors in that industry that are beyond explanation, I think, of how sometimes it works out for some people. And the unknown uncle, the unknown, father-in-law or whatever happens. But, the biggest thing about that film, the silent movie, was it literally was one of the last movies made that way, with everything. I mean, there were times where, and I worked with a great guy at Warner Brothers. This dad had been a silent movie director way back when. And so he was telling me this story one time about on the movie Bus Stop with Marilyn Monroe. They were out in the middle of nowhere. They had no power. And so they needed to put a shadow on the ground. So the guy got a big piece of cardboard, cut a rectangle out, wetted it down with a hose, and when he lifted up the cardboard, it looked like a shadow.
Yeah.
You know, and so that was the biggest lesson I learned in that, was with all these things, all these locations, I came away with this understanding. You will never be a 6-foot extension cord away from shooting a film.
Yo.
You will move the light and you will turn the table or you'll do whatever, but there is nothing that can stop you, you know, when it comes to that. You adapt. If that location doesn't work, you walk the streets looking for another the day of.
Yeah.
I mean, and that was really guerrilla type filmmaking, but it
And it's funny because going back to the Beatles thing, when you watch and when you listen to documentaries of like the way that they would record, there was a lot of that. How are we going to, like, which sounds are we going to choose for that snare drum? And then someone was stepping into something. There you go. That sounds like a cool snare drum or whatever, you know, like creating. Creating.
Well, and John and Yoko, I mean, there's a lot of stories about them coming in after the Beatles even, but with like air hissing machines and like a washer and dryer with a hose off or something where it's like wonk like that'll be great in Yoko's song.
He has some, because John Lennon did a lot of those tracks for her, probably, right? And all those tracks are so out there, just the instrumentation wise and everything. Like what you were just saying. I didn't know that. That's actually hilarious.
Yeah, they'd bring in all sorts of like steam whistles and stuff, and they would sit and make sounds with them and record them and package them away, I guess, for a song someday. Or
they are not thinking about the kids trying to cover the songs later. Good luck finding those sounds.
Let's just make us ourselves happy.
Speaking of sounds, check this out. The musical universe of Rhodes Hull. Can you see it there, Taylor? Shoo!
Very first compilation.
21 tracks, bro.
21 tracks.
That's a greatest hits album.
That's what it was meant to be, actually. Even though I don't have a great fan base so far just yet, maybe it was meant to be like our favorite tracks that, or at least my favorite tracks that I came out with since.
There's some dang good songs
since
on
the beginning.
That's beautiful.
Thank you, man. Appreciate that.
Take us through the journey. So is this your like solo project, or you go with Yeah.
So it's a little different in the present day, but so if we go back to this, when I first started kind of doing music in 2018 with the piano, so over a couple of years of practicing, I was able to start, picking up recording tips and all that, and so I would save up and buy all my recording equipment, just starting with the basic, and making my way up and learning what works and doesn't. So with this CD, the very first picture you'll see on the back, the album 2020, it's Let's Go Away for a While. That was my first album that I ever released, like full length. So I did all the instruments, I did all the vocals, all the mixing, all just up in my bedroom.
That's cool.
His studio, you mean?
My studio. Excuse me. Every kid nowadays. Yeah, my studio. So I did that one, and then I had a lot just kind of built up where I'd start a track and I'd record like a voice memo, to kind of have an idea of if I came up with something, and then I'd go back and it'd be easy because I'd just go listen to what I had basically in my catalog of like, oh, okay, I have all these little samples I could start with, and so that's kind of like how all those came about. So these are all just my original tracks I've been making in the last few years. It stopped at my last album, which is in 2021. And that one actually has 21 tracks. So that's a whole nother 21 track album. But so so this is just handpicked all the favorites from that.
Can I ask, so track 17 is Kiwi Hills.
Yes, yes.
What's the story around that?
So I had started a beat, like I was saying, or not beat, sorry, like just a song,
tempo.
Tempo. I was on my keyboard just playing around some chords. And my mom, being from New Zealand, is kind of what inspired that a lot, because we were supposed to go to New Zealand within like a month or two when I was recording that. And so I was already inspired by that. And so if you hear the track, it's kind of mellow, it's pretty soft. It includes like a lot of like flutes and has like a clav in there for the piano and stuff. So it's pretty mellow, but I don't know. I just got the vibe of Kiwis hopping around, like all in love with each other, like on their little island. Because that was just kind of the original gist I got from it. But heavily inspired by
very,
New
very,
Zealand. Yeah, absolutely.
Emotional song kind of in a way. It's a beautiful song,
And now you're taking the band on a little tour. Is that what's happening?
That's right, yeah. So on my music, you can just find it all under my name, Rhodes Hull. But when we play as a band, I gather my friends together and I teach them the songs that I wrote, basically all the other parts that I can't do. And so they'll help me fill all those in. So my band is called Rhodes Hull's Magic Band. We kind of just started out in 2022, really playing around. But then since then, this past year in 2023, we played around Boise like all the time, all year. So it was really great. We got a lot of experiences in and stuff. And so, so for this next year, we have a couple things coming up. We have our first tour. We're going to hit the road for the first time, so that's really exciting. We've met a lot of bands coming into town and stuff, so they'll help us get, some venues with them. Cool. And then we're also playing at Tree Fort Music Fest. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. It's getting a lot bigger. It's a music festival in Idaho, and it's mainly about like artists that are about to blow up, headlining, speaking wise, and
it's
then
not Glastonbury or anything.
Exactly.
But
it's getting really popular. They have artists from all over the world. Yeah, they have New Zealand artists. I don't know which ones just yet, but they said that some artists from New Zealand will be there this year.
It's like 500 bands in like 30 venues for 5 days. It is crazy.
5-day festival.
It's not just music. They have all these different forts for technology. They wanted me to do a VR one, like a VR fort, actually.
Yeah. So
but I was out of town last year, so I missed it.
So it's great exposure, and like he was saying, they have other forts like comedy forts, so comedians come and stuff like that, and it's mainly about people who are up and coming and at least wanting to get into the business. So it's really great that we were able to get our foot in the door with that, because that can hopefully get us some more gigs coming up. But,
congratulations, man! Let us know so we can bring you to New Zealand as well for a little tour or something.
That'd be awesome. Yeah,
you're talking to two people very keen to organize things, right?
Absolutely.
Easy.
Please,
bands together.
We're always available. Yeah.
And interesting what you said about like huge amount of bands on a 5-day festival, because when I think about America, it relates to Brazil quite a lot. It's a massive country, a lot of people, the culture is massive, but like America has a much bigger infrastructure for things. It's much more prepared to put out good quality stuff. How do you, for both of you in both industries, how do you guys see that competition elements, that you have the opportunity to get your weapons because it's accessible, so you can arm yourself with what you need, like the studio thing, like the cameras, but at the same time, there's a lot of people doing the same thing. So how is that for both scenes?
Well, if I talked about my own situation, it's that basically you can only control yourself, and you can only sometimes compete with yourself. And so the projects, like what I saw in this, the way that this technology came to me in 2008.
We're talking about the virtual reality?
Virtual reality, yeah. It started just virtual tours for computers. There have been many incarnations, I'd say, over the last 20 years that led up to this. But I saw one that was a full screen 360 from Greece, I think it was. And my eyes glazed over. I pointed at it. I was like, that. You could do everything. You could do the whole world. Like all these, because I'd been wanting to do a Battlefield project. When I worked at Warner Brothers Animation, I had talked about doing it in 3D, that you could have basically like a 2-hour timeline where the same exact thing happens all over this battlefield, but there are like 10 camera batteries. And so the audience could choose where they're at to watch the same battle happen. So you could watch a 2-hour event happen. You could go anywhere you want to go to watch it. You could click on people to turn on their audio. You could be with Napoleon at Waterloo. And then, and so I had this idea for a long time, and I was talking to people about it, like that it would be a 3D animation thing. So that's why that, along with some other stuff, and my love of history is another thing. And I think I've figured it out, that I'm just a sentimental sap. I see a building get torn down. I feel horrible that I can't see it again, that I won't get to remember it. I see a field dug up and built with apartments. I feel horrible about the bird I saw standing out there one time, or something. So I realized that I need something I can do that preserves things in a way in which I can still enjoy them. But then you could tell stories. And so the biggest thing for me was, yes, okay, there's this technology, there's the ability to make a 360, but how can I take that further? How can you make it look realistic, like to the point where it actually creates like a subjective experience, where the user is able to actually build upon their real, physical, mental knowledge of things that they've experienced. And that was to augment it, to start to supplement it with the story. Because a location like, you know, whether it be a famous house or like I've been talking about a battlefield or whatever, every location has a story that can be told. And this way is a way of telling it by mining into the history of the subject. There are paintings, there are sometimes illustrations, there are photographs from the early 1900s, there are websites built in the 1990s, there are, you know, promotion videos made in 2003. There are so many things about life, and many subjects that we know, many things that we take for granted every day, actually have a huge history to them. They have somebody who maybe was the visionary who put that thing together originally. There were the people who supported it, but then as time goes by, people forget what it even is. And that's speaking of many things. And so, you know, there's a lot of things I've done that have been torn down. A lot of the battlefields, there's been a lot of changes in the interpretation of how, especially with the Civil War in America. After the war, there was like a resurgence of like a lost cause, they call it. Like to want to retell the story now that the battle's over and tell it from a way that's advantageous to oneself, sort of thing. And so a lot of, you know, it was supported too. So a lot of, you know, a lot of the statues that were put up in little towns in the South were done so to continue. Maybe they're not slaves now, but they're an indentured servant. They're somebody who is stuck. And we're going to put this giant statue of the head of the KKK in the middle of town so that you know where you are and you know where you fit when you come in here. So now that we're moving past this lost cause, but into hopefully looking into just like the true history of it, there's this chance, there's an opportunity, I think, not only here, but with many different subjects, to bring about like a polyphonic interpretation where multiple voices are explaining it for what it is to different points of view and to different things. Not that it has to be overboard with that, but there are many different like reasons why sometimes things happen. I mean, you could have somebody talking about something from a geologic perspective or from a historical perspective or the sociological effects of it or what became of it. There's a lot of things that have happened that were a consequence of something or the effect of a cause. And sometimes those causes come back again. And if you don't remember what the effect is that comes out of it, you know, it repeats itself. And so, and that's one of the paralysis things that I think where a bigger understanding of life and being able to create these and share this information is it rounds people. It rounds them out better. It makes them have not sharp edges, but rounded edges where they've thought about maybe things from multiple perspectives other than their own.
And from what I can see, the way that you're doing it with so much passion, you end up doing it a good job, and then a good job is recognized, right? And that's the key for a lot of the productions nowadays, for a lot of the things that people are doing. It's looking outside and it's not looking at your own passion. What do you really want to do this, or are you worried about what the other people are doing? And from what you're telling me, you just focus on your work.
I don't even
looking at it and
don't even know if I have a competitor. I don't worry about them. I don't look at them. I don't do anything. I'm just busy. I've got the work I'm doing. I've got the work I'm trying to get. And one of the biggest things too is technologically. When you think about this, these tours are fairly complex, but they're made to be simple for the end user. But yet, when I'm talking to somebody like a group, like the White House or the Civil War Trust or Mount Vernon or something, they're joining in effect like an elite club where the technology is being maintained. So when somebody has a virtual tour, I'm not going to let NASA just fall off the side of the truck and lay there and die. You know, I mean, I'm constantly in touch with making sure that as technology changes, every time new devices come out, new security, new browser window, you know, updates, everything that happens, even a new phone comes out, it changes everything. It could be a different size. It could have a different resolution. It could have better speakers. It could have, you know, there's all these things. So to be able to, one part of this whole gig is just staying in the saddle of what's going on and making sure that that's where it's different than things in the past. Because a lot of times with like film or video projects that people do who are in this kind of field, they'll do a video for a client, and then when it's done, it's done. And they may want to edit it one day, like add another photo, or the client comes back, but really those kind of things are like a perishable thing, really. And I realized that too in doing videos and stuff and putting so much time. I made a few films and different things, and you know, people love them and people will watch them, but something that really engages the audience in a way that it doesn't say you have to know this already. It says no matter what you know, no matter what you have learned previously, you can bring that and your opinion and your interest and come to this space, in the virtual space. And if you want to learn all about the gardens at Mount Vernon, you can click on every flower in it that you want. You can learn about the peas. You can learn about everything, like we talked about earlier. But if you just want to be told what to think and watch a 4-minute video, and you know, whoever made it and whatever their mission was to teach you something, that's all you're going to get in some ways. So this has been like a great opportunity to take that sappy sentimentalism I have, but also to really engage intellectually with the people who maintain these sites. Because there is a lot of money, there's a lot of time, and a lot of people that have preserved like George Washington's house and estate, and keep about 8 years ago, they were talking about Maryland Power and Gas was going to build like a massive power plant right across the river. So I joined forces with them, and I got a lot of the photos I'd done. I made like a whole presentation of different photos showing like the house with this, you know, Washington's view shed. Are you going to destroy Washington's view shed?
Put a power plant out there?
With a power plant?
Oh my gosh.
You know, and stuff like that. And so it sort of, it doesn't add, it multiplies. Yeah. Because the people that see it, sometimes I've had people reach out to me who have seen a tour. They'll call the client, like Mount Vernon or something, to ask, you know, hey, you know, we've got this thing going on up here and we saw what you did. Who did it? And what is it? And is it hard? Is it expensive? People don't really know, you know, how much something like that would cost. And so to make it into a formula to where I can offer the same thing with a travel stipend. I could go to Saudi Arabia. I could go to Ireland. I could go to New Zealand. I could go anywhere in the United States. I'm going to do the exact same thing, the exact same process, and charge the exact same amount in most cases. Sometimes you have to cut a little deal to make it work. But that way you're actually, you know, you just have to get there on the airplane or the train or the bus or walk or whatever. And so by making it a system that you can trust that way, I can, with all these things that are done, all 250 things that are done during the production of one tour, I can price the tour by just the price of a single 360. So if you have 10 360s, it's 10 times this amount equals that. Yep. And that includes everything. So that way it's simple. It's something that can be explained from someone else to someone else. And it really has formed like, and the main thing too is that to just take no prisoners whatsoever when it comes to doing it right and going for the very best quality. The time that is spent in the programming, the image creation, even in the writing of it, the layout, the design of buttons and things. I mean, there's just so many steps, but really, I also have a real wish to make it so that it's consistent. So if somebody views NASA, if they view the one for the White House, if they view one of these tours, they're going to know how it works. They're going to know how to use it. It's not full of brand new buttons every time. Yep. It's not something that's upside down and now it's sideways and now it's back upside down. You know, that they can go through the tours. It works on their phone the same. And that's really produced kind of like a continuity for these projects that people then know. And it's made them want my name on the bottom of it. Because with my little logo, they know that that's like a stamp of official, like you've got like the real deal.
I feel like that's the key for so many things. It's when you look at it and it looks simple. You know, a good song, right? I could have written that, but you didn't.
I know exactly what you're talking about. There's so many songs where I feel that way. You know?
but that's what that is
drive,
saying, right? Because you're putting so much time, effort, dedication that you make it look simple.
Yeah, and that's what I love too about like going into kind of like how with my music, like what makes me passionate about is just the fact that like people can reach you by just a few chords and like make you kind of hit your deepest, you know, feelings you probably have. And I just think that's really awesome. And so, just going off of that, I think that being able to have that power to like control people's emotions is just like brilliant. And so you know, from like Charlie Chaplin to the Beatles and stuff. For me, I've seen that it worked on me, so you know, gave me the idea. Oh, it might work for other people.
So timeless.
Mm-hmm. Timeless. Yeah, that's
some
a big part
stuff
of it.
you look at it and they're timeless. They will work at any time. Similar probably with the video clips as well.
That's why I got into videos, because I fell in love with just immortalizing things. And I
Exactly.
think it's the same with like virtual reality. You've just opened this sphere that's so new to us, but it's so exciting because we've now got the technology to finally 3D and immortalize these things forever. And it's
time travel.
It's
almost,
magical,
yeah.
isn't it?
Well, and speaking of that, they're time travel, but also even like with this, I've had the ability to curate an entire city like a museum, where the buildings and the people that live there are the objects in the collection. And so there are oftentimes parts of a tour, and I'm talking to somebody where there's a ton of old historic buildings that are still there. That's what's cool about it. Other ones, the whole city might have been burnt to the ground. But the story about what happened there is, and there's so much historical collateral of what it looked like that you might compare it. And so with like Rhodes said, with time travel, at some of these places like Mount Vernon in particular, they're constantly doing research. They're constantly archaeologically and historically going through and like doing research in the rooms of what you know, who lived there. So there was a bedroom at Mount Vernon called the Nellie Custis bedchamber that was his step granddaughter. But they actually realized after they tore the wallpaper off and did some scanning of the walls that it wasn't that at all. So like 3 years later, I go back and I photograph what's now called the chintz bedroom, which had like chinoiserie, like Chinese type bedding, and everything was like really like Chinese looking, kind of like that was a popular thing in the 18th century, was to get like rare goods from China. And so by doing the 360 again 3 years later in the same spot, if you toggle between it, all of a sudden you go backward to 2014, forward to 2016. You're in the same room with the same stuff, an entirely different design of the room, but it's the same room. And so similarly, you know, with a lot of stuff I've done of like different, you know, in the city or in whatever, you take a picture today, you come back in 5 years, there's a 10-story building there. There's another building that's been torn down, and there's now a park full of people. I mean, things change. Yeah. And so to see it like migrate that way, and especially now in this, and I knew early on, because this was so new, that every single thing I was doing was like, to me, I considered it historical. I considered, you know, when I did Hearst Castle, or when I did that, no one's been allowed to do that before. And it opened up, like, so when you think about like access or accessibility, you think of accessibility, a lot of people think, oh, that means you can't get up the stairs, or no, a lot of places you're not allowed in there. You're not allowed to go up on the roof of Hearst Castle. You're not allowed to go stand at Washington's bed he died in. But if you wanted to see it, now you have a chance, because you can still go on those tours in person. You can walk through the house. You can see what you can see. But to be able to go into some places like you're not allowed to go.
NASA mission control and stuff like that.
Yeah, and mission control,
cool.
standing right over
where they control everything.
Well, and NASA has a big update coming, actually. So one of the things we're doing this year in May is we're redoing most of that NASA tour. That thing was built during COVID, and it was the only way, because the whole thing was shut down.
Of course. So
they wanted to, even in mission control, there were only like 5 people in the room, because they didn't want someone to bring COVID in and give it to everybody, because all of a sudden all their satellites out in space, there's only certain people they call very special people who can communicate with the satellites. So now going back, they want to make it look like there's a launch. They want to have the separate room like where they launched the Perseverance 2020 rover. And the best thing about that is, one of the coolest things, the rover is currently driving around the Jezero crater on Mars. And so we're going to use it, and we're going to make a 360 tour of the Jezero crater. Wow. So it's going to drive around. We're going to predetermine some spots. It's going to make it shoots like its own type of 360. It's not exactly what I do, but we're going to add it to the NASA tour, so you can be at mission control, maybe head over to the spacecraft assembly facility. Then, hey, do you want to go to Mars? You know, and so we're starting to add what's called the Deep Space Network as well. We're doing the first of those 3. They have 3 Deep Space Network satellite dish clusters, basically. They have one in Canberra, they have one in Madrid, Spain, and they have one in Barstow, California. So they're all 3 points around the world. So as the world turns, they hand it off to the next one. So if in Madrid is the one monitoring all the satellites, when it's about to swing around to the dark side of the world, they pass it over to Canberra. I think Canberra is in charge of all the satellites until they go around the dark side of the earth. Then they pass it to Barstow. So it's like
how much of that involves the power that each country has over our space? I'm always curious about that because we hear a lot about NASA doing amazing stuff, but like all the countries around the world must.
They're starting to ramp up, I think, with satellite launches. There's been obviously India and Japan trying to with the moon. The United States just had a private group launch a thing to the moon that was unsuccessful, unfortunately. But I think you're going to see a lot more people trying to get a cut of that pie somehow from different countries wanting to be part of either a union group that's doing it, but they want that national prestige for themselves too. Right. It means a lot. You land something on the moon, you're a player, you know, and for a country like India or something, and India, there's another project they were doing with NASA as well for one that actually is in the virtual tour. So they have a lot of projects they do in conjunction with other countries, but it builds the you know, comradeship, the friendship. The space is something that needs to stay neutral. We don't need satellites blowing up satellites and, you know, rovers shooting other rovers on the moon and trying to blow them up.
Like we're trying to make a Pano 2 over here.
I know. Then I would be pissed. Yeah. That rover is toast if they're trying to shoot a Pano.
Wow, that's an interesting way of seeing it, of course, because it makes sense the conflicts would stretch, right, a leg and get into space as well, but trying to keep it neutral.
Well, and some of the scariest things to think about are the kind of materials that are out there. Like there's a new mission I know they were doing called Psyche that's going to like a gagillion-dollar asteroid that's made up of platinum and gold and silver and every other rare earth mineral. But it's like a 500,000 pound piece of platinum and gold flying through space. And so, you know, there's obviously, and it's not just that, but maybe on the moon, maybe in the asteroid belt, maybe on Mars, they might find materials that are rare. They might even find other elements that aren't present on Earth. And so the race to get to those, the race to eliminate the need for power generation on Earth, maybe, or to be, you know, all those kind of factors are playing in. But one of the most important ones for sure is that hopefully it's done in a way with peace. Because we're not going to, I mean, the pole melting is going to be bad enough because that one will not have that same, there's going to be a fight for the melted polar ice caps coming to a theater near you very soon. But for outer space and for that, you know, and also to, you know, utilize space. I mean, I know there's been talk of, you know, using things like permanent drones in the sky to like, you know, kind of like they do for like light shows or whatever, that you could actually have, you know, satellites that are visible that ruin the view of space, that you can see them constantly going across. Or you try to take a photograph and the sky is in it and there's a 10 or 12 white beam, you know, like satellites going across the picture. So what we see today, we have like the Wild West. It's like the Coromandel around here. Outer space is still a virgin, beautiful thing. But there may very well be a day in 10 years, in 20 years, where there is war with AI-generated robots being fought right around our planet.
But not as in a way to like write it or it was mainly like a mixing, the last details of just mixing it up. Because yeah, so I wrote the song, presented it to my bandmates. We've been playing it around at shows. We finally got around to recording it now. So when we were recording it, we did all the takes and stuff. My friend, he just graduated from Portland State with a music production degree, so he's all about that now. And so he was producing it for us and recording us. And then he has a system where he can send it to an AI website, and it basically just masters it and you know, pitches it up a little bit more, make sure everything's not too loud and compressed enough. So that was the first time I've ever.
Was it good? The results?
Oh yeah,
did you like it?
Fantastic. Yeah. I mean, what would you think?
That's a great song. No, yeah, that's it's new stuff. He's got. I'm sitting down because I work. My office is there too. I have a separate one,
yeah,
but I
right
can
below
hear
me.
these songs, so I come running up with the camera. I'm like, start over,
Yeah.
you know, and I want to film it or something, and just so they can hear it themselves and stuff.
'cause we play right above him. He's below us in his office, and we're upstairs, just right on that floor. So
there's a lot going on around there.
Good on you guys. So much power is in the way that things are evolving fast and how much we can get.
Incredibly so, yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious about, like, as you said, the next 10 years or so.
one
Because
thing,
it's so fast.
yeah.
10 years ago, have a look. Like,
Going-
size of cell phones, the way that we were doing things in 10 years. Imagine, like, from 10 years ago.
Wi-Fi was new, like a new concept,
yeah.
like 10 years. That's we've
true.
well excelled over that.
Going back to the space and things that can be disturbing coming up, one thing that I'm terrified of happening is when they start putting ads on satellites. So, because I've heard that's a big thing now, where like they're gonna start having these giant like LED displays of just
way.
like McDonald's
Yeah,
ads.
that's kind of what I was talking
Yeah,
about.
so like
way.
that is not gonna be
Like, in the sky. Just
like another way to promote yourself, you know. So they're gonna have all these, you know, like Domino's, I'm sure, and McDonald's, all these different like these ads floating through the sky at some point. So that's a scary thought.
See, you have to be able to opt out. You
Exactly,
shouldn't have to look
yeah.
at the sky
It should
and
be like
see
the Apple
a
VR.
freaking
You just have to wear
ad
that
for
or something.
McDonald's or something.
Yeah.
You know, no offense to McDonald's.
But yeah, that was just an example. But
Yeah.
I've heard that's like a big thing that's coming up, and so I thought that was really disturbing, honestly.
Well, and AI, I think, brings an opportunity to tie things together in a way that were never able to even be seen before. Like, I know, like, down in, like, the Mayan jungles and stuff in Guatemala, they just even having aerial photography and stuff and being able to use, they're able to, like, see repetitions and shapes and realize that all these new, like, civilizations they've been finding that they couldn't see with the naked eye. It'd be like going up in the bush up there and trying to look around. You can't even see the ground. You know,
It's
but in
like
some of
those
these
new
places,
scanners, right?
yeah,
They're
so
scanning
they're
the ground, they've
LIDAR and
found
stuff, and they can see the shapes.
civilizations
And,
from 10,000, like 400,000 years ago or something crazy like that.
but I think what it helps with a lot too is the deduction process of what things that take a human mind to resolve. This is one that can do like 10,000 of those at once. You know, where there are things that can be resolved in such a way that it can compare visuals, it can compare audio wavelengths, it can compare all these things that are otherwise, it takes a real, you know, like George Martin to come and like realize, hey, that's a different sound wave than that one, you know, or it's a repetition. There's obviously something going on here that we didn't realize happens every 2 minutes, like a heartbeat almost. And so there are things that it opens up, like ways to see things that haven't been, that the human senses are almost not capable of being able to pull together in that way.
What is the name of that guy that goes to Joe Rogan every now and then, and he talks about Area 51, the one that found the? Do you remember his name, Taylor? It comes to me. He says like he found that motor that doesn't do the classic way of things like with how physics explain the Bob Lazar. Do you know the guy? Mm-mm. Just like everyone tries to put him down, and he speaks up about what's going on in the Area 51. And then I always think about it. I'm like, have we been around? You know, like, have we been to this process of a high technological world, and then things just disappeared, and then maybe we've been to space, but like, and then we start. And I always think about that because we know little about the history of humankind. Like, it looks like a lot, but when we think about how long things have been out there, you know, like, it always fascinates me with like, what's the path? Is it self-destruction, but then we survive somehow, and then someone starts again? You know, I'm always curious to that.
Well, do you remember the original Planet of the Apes with Charlton Heston, where he comes around on the beach and there's like half of the Statue of Liberty poking up out of the dirt, and he's like, no. See, and I've thought about that. They're I mean, it's hard to know with the amount of destruction the Earth can do. I mean, when you look at the sheet of ice that covered the United States 10,000 years ago, it was like a mile thick, and it went from the North Pole all the way to New York City, basically. It'd be like coming up to a cliff that's a mile high of solid ice. So everyone that lived in those areas fled that ice and went south. And so could there have been other things? Could there have been civilizations even back 100,000 years ago or something that have completely been erased from the face of the earth, basically? Maybe they're down there 25 feet below the ground. where you can find aspects of it. But the way they find things, like in some of the, like in Peru, I was just in Lima, and like the Nazca lines and some of these things that you can only see from space. Like these lines are, you know, whatever, 2,000 years old, but, and it's the shape, it looks like a, you know, a person, or it's a shape of some animal or something, but it only can be identified from like 5,000 feet in the air. Because if you're on the ground, you can't tell what it is. So things like that, like who did that? How did they, how were they able to do it like that? You know, was there a group that, you know, I mean, there's just so many aspects of that where you wonder, like, if there isn't, in fact, maybe this has, because 5,000 years, 10,000 years, that's nothing. Yeah. You know, for humanity, even you think about, like, I've been thinking a lot about Buddy Holly lately for some reason, because it was just the 65th anniversary. And I found out Waylon Jennings was the bass player who didn't get on the plane. I had no idea.
He was almost going to be that person.
He was going to be the guy, and so he gave up his seat to the Big Bopper.
Or was it Big Bopper?
Yeah, he gave it to the Big Bopper.
I know
Richie Valens asked for the other guys.
Yeah, he
he asked for the
guitar. Died in a secret.
But when you see, it's just, you know, going on.
I have a cool segue there, because when you sent me the bio, I was buzzing with the Matrix.
Oh gosh.
That you were part of it, and I'm like, cool, this is a good segue, you know, like to what's actually going on with us as humans. And you worked for the production for the Matrix.
Yeah,
is that correct?
well, when I worked for Warner Brothers, the job that I had in our department was whenever we had film production, setting up a production at the studio, we were the studio. So we would help them set up their offices. We would get them the stages. We would help them with sometimes even selecting bottom of the line crew. So The Matrix actually was one that they called an Article 20 film. So it wasn't made by Warner Brothers. It was made with independent money that Warner's distributed. And so there were the two filmmakers, the Wachowskis, and they had only done kind of like sort of an erotic film before that. And so I got a copy of the script, like I often did, and I read the original script, which was so much different than the final movie. I still have a copy of it. Cool. And it was like all of a sudden, and you see the holes in the telephone on the payphone, and you go inside, and I was sitting there reading it, and I was thinking like, man, whoever wrote this has to direct it, because how else? I mean, this doesn't even because I really don't think on the first read, and I don't think people watching the film have actually really gotten to the bottom. Maybe they have now of what the red pill is and what it is, you know, what that is. It a metaphor for something else, which I think is what it really probably is. But it, the way it was set up, so we ended up setting up these warehouses where we brought in Mandarin, Chinese, like Kung Fu masters, and we set up wires and stuff, and they actually trained like Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss and all of them how to do like that kick scene where he flies up and kicks. He's hung up by wires basically. So they would sit and practice all that stuff. So when it was being made, I didn't really think a lot about it, to be honest. It was a smaller film. And so what happened is one of the things I did is I kept track of all the film's daily call sheets and production reports for Warner Brothers. So I would take like 15 call sheets for the day and 12 production reports of what happened, and I would make them into a single form to give to all the executives so they could see like, oh, they shot 3,000 feet. They printed 3,000 feet. Oh, they wrapped out this actor. Oh, they finally at this location. Oh, you know, there's all these facts that are in the call sheets and production reports. So all of a sudden I'm looking at this one for The Matrix, and it's like on day 76 of 50. And I just kind of asked the guy, I was like, hey, you know, to one of the executives, I said, what's up with this film? You know, it's like on day 76. And it's like the most over a film has been probably since Giant, you know, in the 50s when that went on for a year. And he said, you know what happened? He said, you know how there was the .com crash or whatever? It was before that, but there was a big
Y2K,
crash.
Yeah.
It was like they had shot it in Australia. So the exchange rate had changed so much. They ended up with like an extra $1 million because they had like 35 or whatever $1 million. So they decided to take the money from the extra currency exchange and go back to ILM and go rebuild a couple of the scenes. And so he said, it will be worth it. And when it came out, obviously, I did a lot of those really like cool scenes and stuff like that, and really kicked it up a notch because I think they were seeing what was there too. They realized that the film had, but even as an Article 20, it wasn't a Warner Picture, so nobody was really it just sort of was like autonomously being made. It was like a film that is there, and they have a lot of those that happen like that, where maybe it'll be a really great filmmaker. They come in, they set them up an office so they can work. They let them pay them to hire a little staff. They've got 25 scripts they're already thinking about. They develop one. Like Clint Eastwood kind of works that way at Warner's. He's done now, I'd say, pretty much. But when he was there, as far as anyone was concerned, Clint brings us a script. It'll be done on time or early, and the budget will be right on. And so Clint brings a project, he makes a project. Nobody's what are you gonna do? Stand up to Dirty Harry and say, make my day? No, so he would, and I worked on the Midnight of Garden of Good and Evil and a couple others. He did the same thing, Midnight of Garden of Good and Evil. Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil was done like 5 days ahead of schedule and came in right on budget. So it was like, there's a real talent to being able, and that's like what they always talk about with auteurs, of like a Hollywood auteur is a director who can somehow, despite all the roadblocks and obstacles and power plays in a studio, somehow, despite all that, they can still make a film that you can tell it's theirs. Yeah. There's things about it, there's the way it's made, the way the story is told, that despite all those things, because I worked on one film that I would say would be probably the biggest example of one that went from being something that was, so it was, I don't know if I should say the name of it. Say it. Well, I will, because, I don't work there anymore. Yeah, but I worked on this film called The House on Haunted Hill. The original script was very scary, but it went in front of committee, it seemed like, and so we started getting all the revisions, blue revisions, pink revisions. They have a whole set, like the colors that so they send you new pages. Oh, it's the yellow revisions. So we'd all pull out our script, take out the brads, switch out the pages, throw away page 14, 26. Pretty soon I've got this thing that is like a rainbow. It's been totally rewritten. It took out this whole, because that's a story about a group of people having to stay the night in an insane asylum that's been closed since the 30s. And they get $1 million if they stay all night. You've all heard that kind of story. Jeffrey Rush was in it. But by the time all these revisions were in, it really watered down. And the director, I think, was pretty upset about it. They were coming from elsewhere to make it like a buddy film and to make it like a, just the things that happen. And so to me, is all I'm saying about that film is it was a representation of the way the Hollywood system, agents, the way everyone gets involved, but they're like, no, you're not having him if he doesn't have a more prominent role. Or there's so many little things like that, that they affect the whole thing. Well, then in that case, let's make him the star, and we'll make this other person the sidekick.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
And so you see, and that was one example, and I've seen a few like that, where you see the whole script, like kind of, it comes in hot, so to say, like right off the writer's like fingertips. They finally got it there. Them and everyone who's putting this script together is completely like enamored with it. They could work with that studio or that studio, but we're working with this studio. But then it kind of gets sucked into that bloodstream, and it leaves people's hands, and they'll
diluted with other ideas.
They start shooting it with a star involved. They'll fire the director before they'll fire and reshoot without the star. I mean, so it's
it's an industry. It's an interesting industry.
It is. And so back to what we were talking about a long time ago about like making a film school in that era, to see the coming of age of this. I mean, when I was there at Warner's, this was just in 1997 through 2005 or whatever. I mean, we were still painting scenic backdrops. So a lot of times in a movie, you look out the window and there's like a city out there and stuff. And a lot of those are just backgrounds that are lit. They cut the windows out and they have lights on in them. I mean, you can't even tell. Yeah. Or like they're out in the Old West, especially in older films, you'd always see it. They're like riding their horse and they're just in front of a big, huge scenic backdrop that's like 100 feet long. And they'll ride their horse across it. And, it's... So there was like the whole like analog on film filmmaking days sort of, and just crossed away and went away. And there was always a purism about film, cinema. I want cinema. Not about just putting on a movie and watching it on TV or something, or not a video, but cinema, like a great director and a great experience. You go to the movie and people are hissing at the screen. And if you've ever seen a film in France before, like that is crazy. Because people are they'll get up and walk out, or they'll stand there and scream at the screen and clap for 15 minutes when the film's over. You know, so like cinema. And so this was an era in which like video was coming out and videotapes and beta and all these other things that were inferior as clear as day. And then digital was this thought that maybe would one day come. Like, what if it wasn't on a cassette tape and you could, you know, take like these, you know, giant negatives and scan them properly. I mean, there was always that thought that it was going to this. But it really changed everything. I mean, all of a sudden, you don't need 6 guys on a camera crew loading film. You don't, you know, and with a lot of the special effects stuff, I mean, during some of the films I worked on, is when I first saw a green screen come in and be put up, like one in the whole studio on a whole side of the thing. Yeah. You know, I mean, they were really moving towards, and when I worked at Warner Brothers Animation on Looney Tunes, the last picture I worked on, I had a real position of responsibility. I basically was like it was the senior assistant production manager, it was called, which was like almost a joke kind of a name, because I ran like 6 different departments of all the comping. So I get all the animation in, all the effects in, we would comp them there. So it was like the camera department. And so then we would watch it with the director. But what was happening is you've got this animation studio full, they were all kids of Disney people who had worked on like Peter Pan, and they were true 2D animators, people that were the best at what they did. But all of a sudden you have this group of, you know, folks come in that are like 25 years old that are doing digital or doing like things with, you know, one day it was totally exemplified. This lady said to me, "We can do it faster, quicker, and better." And I just looked at her and I said, well, you know, maybe in some ways. But, you know, that is one of the most horrible things I think I've ever heard. I'll just let you know. Because if you know how hard those people out there drawing bugs, and not everyone can just do that, turnarounds of characters. They start out with rough drawings, then they do a cleanup set, then they do a final set that's ready to be painted. Then they go to ink and paint, then they go. So there's all these steps these go through, and there's a reason for it. But then I will conclude by saying this. It was also one of the reasons when I started virtual tours and virtual reality is in animation, because there are all those departments that one shot goes through, and you might have 400 shots in a movie that have to go through like 50 steps. If you get to the end and somebody comes from the studio and says, I just don't like it. I don't like that shot. You know, I don't like, it doesn't add to the story. Then it has to go back to the beginning and come all the way back through. It has to be redrawn, repainted, cleaned up, everything. And so with the virtual tours, I realized I could have such a short track in and out that even on the biggest of projects, I could be in and out in like 2 or 3 months with it delivered up. And that to me was like amazing. Yes, it really was. That's what made me decide I could do it. Because of but now that I am doing it, of course, some projects still take 2 years, but you know, what can you do? But it's, that was definitely something that it appealed to me, was the thought that, you know, I don't need 26 people working with me on this. And, you know, because of the time, and you can't remember things in a year sometimes.
That's a cool thing that you're saying of like when the lady said we can do it faster, you know, and more efficiently and everything. But there's the novelty, there's the beauty of the classic, of the way that things were made before, which takes me back to music, because as a musician, nowadays it's like that, as you said, every kid has a studio, you know, like it's just the bedroom. But it is a studio,
and
you know,
like it's do the same thing.
It's this tiny device that can do everything. However, we're back to the vinyls, you know, like 2023, like the year that vinyls were like top.
I still have hundreds from before. When everyone sold them, I was buying them. In the early 90s.
Even with recordings, right? The analog thing. There's that beautiful thing of like,
that rich, full sound.
You want to go for analog, right? If you have the buck.
That's what's nice about that AI thing, is it kind of gives us that feature to have it more analog sounding or digitally sounding. So we have been keeping it more analog-y just for that. Yeah, that same feeling.
So. I love it. What instruments do you play, bro?
Yeah, I play. I started out on piano, and then I picked up guitar the following summer, and then bass, because guitar and bass are similar. And then drums. I got a drum kit, so know a little bit about drums. Then after that, it starts getting a little less, you know, like expertise, but I still know my way around a little bit. So I can play like the flute, the banjo. My girlfriend just got me a dulcimer for Christmas, so I've been trying to learn how to play one of those. It's a really cool instrument. So yeah, about like 6 or 7 of them, and then also the mixing and vocals wise.
What do you find most challenging?
Vocals.
Which one?
100%.
For you at home who goes to karaoke and think that you're kicking ass, think that you're great, sorry, Rhodes is here to tell you some truth.
No, it is
not easy.
It can ruin a whole song. You can have a whole instrumentation that's like stellar, and then all of a sudden you start recording your vocals and it's like, why is this awful now? So you really have to put it all in and be, that's what was nice having my producer friend there, was he was kind of there to help me, like, well, maybe try it this way and like sing it this, like not sing it this way, but take out like one word so it flows a little better. And so he kind of would point out little tips that help me with the newer song and stuff. So, but yeah, singing is hard, man. It's very hard.
Well, especially playing an instrument at the same time.
Yeah, that too, yeah. But gosh, yeah, usually I get instrumentations mostly done, and then the vocals always come last. That's usually the last part. Yeah.
And it needs work, eh? It's one of those
usually
things
needs a lot of work.
You have an idea, and then you record it, and then you listen back, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's do some work on
it's empty.
now.
It's so empty. Yeah, so that vocals definitely, I think, are the hardest for me, at least. And it's funny, it used to be the opposite. I used to be good at writing like lyrics more often, but now I have more trouble writing lyrics than I do.
Probably the music's got more complicated too.
Yeah,
more
that too.
complex
Yeah,
and
so
more
trying to fit a melody into it.
And all sorts of stuff going on.
Yeah, so that didn't help.
And I imagine like coming from being like a solo artist to having to adapt to having other band members and communicating with them.
And getting their opinions too, like kind of like, well, like, are we all on the same page with this? And do we all like how this is sounding? So it's been great though. The band I have right now, we're all like the same age and we're all good buds. We grew up in Idaho together, so we all kind of know each other and we get along really well. So it's nice. We can kind of be hard on each other, like that doesn't sound good, dude. Like, don't do that. So,
You tapped into the music industry as well for a little bit, or it was more like live acts and things?
Yeah, well, I guess I would say that the day I started film school and turned 21, I also got hired at the House of Blues on Sunset Boulevard. And it just happened to be like a perch of a place to be that I can't even tell you some of the stories I've had and the people that played there. It was the hottest club in the world when I was there. We would have the Kinks for 3 nights. We would have Fleetwood Mac for 5 nights. We had James Brown. We had Ray Charles, Al Green, Eric Clapton. And some of the experiences I had just are the most treasured I have. Sitting backstage with Jefferson Airplane, talking with Grace Slick, getting to meet Joe Cocker, and talk to him, and just some of the experiences working in production and working all night and it was just great working on the Sunset Strip. And they've torn that down since then. So any epic stories, any moments with a star, with a legend that you never forget? Yeah, and I'm gonna call him out on it because I worked on one of his films. So Steven Seagal came. No, I worked
Steven
on.
Seagal, are you listening? Yes. Steven Seagal, pay attention to this one.
So
we'll tag
he doesn't know this, so if he hears it, he'll have to come back from Moscow and go find me or something. But no, I worked on the movie called Exit Wounds with DxO and him, and so I already kind of knew it. So at the House of Blues, it was a Richie Sambora Bon Jovi night where they were having like a tribute to Richie Sambora.
Oh, wow.
So, and who shows up and is going to be a part of it but Steven Seagal. So he's up there and he, they're all on stage and he's playing and he keeps looking at the monitor guy like, turn me up. But then pretty soon he looks at the front of the house guy and he's kind of like, turn me up. And so how this happened and worked out this way is almost too funny to even think about because it was kind of an accident. So the guy in the front of the house was finally like, oh, I can't take it anymore. He turns him completely off from the mix. The guy in the monitors turns him up so hot that all he can hear is himself. And he's up there playing in front of his amp, and he's the only one that can hear himself. And I thought, isn't that just like fitting? Doesn't that just make sense? That the only one who can hear him playing is him.
Have you seen a video on YouTube that is John Lennon playing with Chuck Berry, and then Yoko
exactly
Ono?
What you're talking about. They cut her off. Yeah.
She starts screaming at the mic, so they're rocking a pretty sweet tune, and she's like, ah.
Well, she did kiss me, love.
Oh my god!
They're just playing some like standard
Did Chuck
song.
Berry like
Bluesy,
whack her with the
rocky.
stick or something?
He like makes a face, like they're kind of like jamming. Him and John are like face to face, like in the mic, and then all of a sudden Yoko comes on behind him, like into her mic, and he goes, "What the fuck?" Like he makes like a total like,
Oh, Maybelline.
And you have a cool story with Sublime as well. They were telling us before the show.
Well, it's one of those
favorites.
things. It is one of those sad things for me because there were some times, and this kind of reminds me of like with Rhodes and his band. There are bands that are really good that are starting out. They have a little following of local friends, family, people in town that have caught their show. There's traveling up to Hollywood to see them play. They were a Long Beach band. And they played, I think they played 2 different shows up there, but the last show they played, they had really kind of started to catch, and it was just an epic night. But then it was only like, it wasn't very long after that the lead singer guy passed away. And I just remember this feeling of like, just, I mean, probably like like with a Chuck Berry or with, there's all of a sudden there's like all this potential loss. There's this group of friends. There were these people who believed in them all. They were all going to Hollywood to watch a show. You know, I mean, there was a real like cohesion and power there. And they were nice people. They were cool. And so just all of a sudden, like for him to just, you know, kick the bucket like that. And I know they've continued on and they've got Rome now and they're still.
And I think his son now is stepping up for a few shows or for a tour or something.
Wow.
Did you hear about that?
I don't know. But wow, that's crazy. But it was just one of those things. It was like, haven't we seen this movie before where all the talent, all the possibility, all the potential, and it just goes down the tube just like that. Just while you watch it, like in slow motion, watching 2 cars crash into each other and everyone's dead. Yeah. That was one of those. And you know, there've been a few others like that, but that one, I don't know. It's always kind of stuck with me about that. And then there was a tragedy the night they played. I went upstairs and I actually happened to be one of the first people up there after it happened. A guy had went out and their tour bus was parked on Sunset Boulevard. This guy went to run across the street and like a car was speeding down Sunset and hit him. His 2 shoes were still right where he was standing, and he was off the hill down on Sunset Boulevard on the side of the street. Like it knocked him like 50 feet, and his shoes stayed right where he had been standing because he got hit going like 40 or something. Wow. That's miles per hour though, so it'd be like 80 kilometers or something, you know. But there were so many stories there. There were so many nights, and the people, you know, working for Dan Aykroyd and Jim Belushi as the head bosses, and all their little needs and wants, and the upstairs little foundation room where you'd go up there. I mean, you don't know who would be up there on any given night. We'd have things with, I mean, I could sit and name tons of people that are, you know, godlike to many, but it's like, it just was one of those places. It was a place where it was truly magical for the time it was. And it did eventually. And I ended up going over to another club called Billboard Live that used to be Gazzari's. And Gazzari's is where the Doors got their start and Van Halen. It was right like a block down from the Rainbow Room and the Roxy and the Whiskey. And so I became the stage manager over there. And just some of the stuff, though, with those bands we'd have there, they were nobodies then. But a lot of them, I shouldn't say nobodies, because we did have, I mean, they'd be people like Nickelback. Or Dio, or, you know, ones that like, you know, the people would show, but it was a different kind of place than the House of Blues. But being in that, even though I was, you know, roadie loading in equipment and working the nightclub, I wasn't like running the night. I wasn't like in charge of the bands, but I stood and held Stevie Wonder's keyboard in my hand one day. I've had, I mean, just these moments like that, you know, where you're just like, my gosh, what a blessing. And it lasted about 2 or 3 years. I met my wife there, Rhodes' mom. I mean, so it all worked out pretty good.
And the rest is history. Guys, thank you so much. What a cool, I feel like we just like
started.
Yeah. So I feel like I'm gonna have to bring you guys back at some stage, hopefully with the band.
Sure, yeah, we'd love that. Yeah.
So let us know more about how to find the music, bro.
Yeah. Okay. So like I said, it's just under my name everywhere, Rhodes Hull. So
Spell
Spotify, RHODESHULL. Not the other, not the Rudy.
But we did copyright and all that. Rhodes Hull, ROADSHOLE. Because, you know, people are thinking you might hear it on the radio. And it'd be like Rhodes Hull, like a hole in the road. So if you go to that, it goes to him too.
Yeah. Because Leah, we were trying to look up your website, and Leah was like, Hull. And I was like, yeah. And then I was like, oh, like Hull.
Hull.
Like
a ship.
Instead of, yeah, like the ship. Yeah.
Well, there's like 10 ways to spell it, right? I mean, there's WHOLE, HOLE, HILL, H. I mean, there's so many ways it gets misspelled.
And there's the Brazilian way that is the worst one ever. That it doesn't
What's
sound
that?
right. Well, Easy couldn't pick up when I said Hull.
I've seen myself called Brandon Hell once. I mean, I was like, no, that's not my name.
Was it an
Like, who would name their kid?
Was it an
that?
Ozzy Osbourne show? Brandon Hell.
Yeah, no, you know, it's just one of those things. It's one of those names that's hard, you know, even though it's when you see it like, oh, HULL. You know, it's so simple. But
so HULL.
Or Hull,
film?
HALL. Yeah, so HULLFILM.com. Not Whole Films. Believe it or not, with even a name like that, in the town I used to live in Burbank, there is a Whole Films.
Of course.
And they make documentaries and stuff like that. And there's the city in Hull in England. So they have the like Hull Film Commission.
Of course.
But just wholefilm.com on there.
Such a cool website, by the way. Good job.
Oh, thank you.
Amazing.
Yeah, well, and it's all about the content. I mean, obviously, it's not a big flash and mirrors kind of website with, it's more right to the stuff. The content's there. You want to see NASA, you want to see, you know, battlefields, Mount Vernon, but also a lot of other stuff. Salvador Dali museum's on there. You know, there's a lot to choose from and stuff. And hopefully there's a consistency to the work. There's a ability to learn. There's something that, you know, like for Mount Vernon again, I keep bringing them up because they're really pillar in this whole process, because George Washington's where everything begins in America. And they've, not only with their analytics have they been able to determine that, you know, when people come into town to Washington, D.C., they're sitting at the airport, they've got 150 things they could do. They're, you know, everything costs money, everything has lines, everything, you know, there's only so much energy and power. You got kids with you, they're not going to last 18 hours a day, even if you want to. So it's a decision-making process. So when you go there and you see that virtual tour online, they've said through the analytics, they figured that for every click of that tour, every click of a pano, of a POI, whatever, they make 7 cents in revenue from people that come. For how many people view the tour, it went from being like an also ran. It's their #1 digital offering. They've got I've done Monticello. Now I'm going to be doing the new Teddy Roosevelt Presidential Library that's just being built. Cool. But it becomes a way to transfer this information and to bring in fans, to bring in people that are young today. There may be a future donor or volunteer tomorrow. So all this stuff works hand in hand. When when people become a member of something they care about, and they have an avenue by which to help. Even, you know, not everyone has money, but some people have other ways they can. Nothing pleases me more. Like I've seen pictures of like classrooms where 30 kids are sitting there at computers. Every one of them is just totally into it, like doing the tour. It's like the funnest assignment you could have, right? Instead of like having to write and do math or something, you can sit and play on a virtual tour of something cool.
We hope to see more of these in Aotearoa, in New Zealand. That would be great. Yeah, so we can have you guys for longer as well, right?
Yeah. Well, I definitely have some long-term plans that I want to do. And for New Zealand, a lot like everything else, I want to do it kind of organically. I don't want to come in and just try to force my way. And, you know, I want to pick a few things that are really special on that website. And they can't really understand it sometimes until they see one in their own town. You know, like then they see one made in the town they live in. And like, oh, now I see. Wow. That's because they just assume, you know, like everything else must be already great.
Nice. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to see some of our spaces here.
But really quick, if I could just finish tagging off.
Sorry. Of course.
Spotify, you can Rhodes Hull, Apple Music, iTunes. You can go to my website, rhodeshull.com. We're starting to get more physical copies, so on my website you'll be able to find those soon.
Man, I love the stickers, bro.
Yeah, and then you got some stickers. Shout out to Eli Kendall. He's fantastic in Idaho.
They're psychedelic as, man.
Yeah.
Love it. Make sure to check Rhodes' music out and wholefilm.com. Beautiful project. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Izzy.
you. Thank you all. It's been a pleasure.
It's been fun. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Blue Ginger, for the beautiful Kai. Thanks for all the beautiful supporters that keep the Altbays Table Talk going. This is show 250.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
2 years. Yeah, it's a milestone.
That's a lot.
Thank you guys very much.
Yeah,
It's a
thank
special
you.
one for sure.
Yeah.
So
Congratulations.
2 years. We are celebrating 2 years on the 14th of February. 2 years of the Altbays Table Talk. 1 year of the Coral Minds magazine. This is a project. This is a community project. So if you would like to know more about the beautiful Coromandel region, make sure to check out coralminds.nz. If you're lucky enough to live in the Coromandel, you will find the physical copies in pretty much all the establishments, cafes, and supermarkets in the region. It's a free magazine supporting local artists, telling local stories. If you are a business and you want to advertise smart, coralminds.nz, or obviously Altbays Table Talk. We're growing. We had 2 million impressions on the last month. A lot of views, which is good. The platform is growing. We're going to be at the NZ Podcast Summit in May as guest speakers. We got invited. It's Auckland University, which is an honor for us. Thank you very much, Lewis Tennant, to get us on board. We just got back from Waitangi Day, which was a pleasure for us to be in Waitangi with Lachlan from the Aotearoa History Shoutouts and Uncle Tix, the legend. We were there for 4 days. We learned heaps. Tameiti family, Tameiti Whānau, thanks for welcoming us there. We're going to send you guys this clip because I told you that we would send you love from our show. So thank you very much. Thanks for all the people watching us. Thanks for our beautiful guests.
Thank you.
We're
Thank
live
you.
every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 p.m. on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and after the show, we upload the audio version in all the leading audio platforms. I'll see you next Tuesday. Peace.